Welcome to the SPE President's Vodcast featuring 2025 SPE President Olivier Houzy.
Hello, my name is Olivier Houzy, and this is the video version of my JPT column for December 2024. My last two columns were dedicated to energy transition and SPE's finance. And today I will speak about SPE's governance with a particular focus on the SPE Board of Directors and the way its members are selected. I will revisit the 2022 controversy of the SPE-APG merger project and the board petitions that followed, and I will try to present the lessons learned from these two episodes. I will conclude with a proposed path to improve our process and increase membership, communication, and participation. Now, there is no graph and table in this column, so it may as well be listened to as a podcast, and the support slides of the video version are just summary bullet points. Now, a lot of topics can be addressed with an engineer's mind based on facts. But on a topic like governance, there are facts, but it is essentially about human factors. So a lot is subjective and involves opinions. You will accept an opinion based on how confident you are in its author. So I am aware of this, and there is not much to do about it. So all I can do is share my analysis and opinions on this topic and let you take it with a pinch of salt you see fit. I will start with an explanation of our current process. In early November 2024, SPE announced the opening of the nomination cycle for the SPE International Board of Directors. In this cycle, a third of the SPE board positions are open, with the 2027 president, 2 regional directors, and 3 technical directors. The process always starts with our members, who are expected to be the ones to nominate the candidates. And it may finish with members' votes, but only in case of petition. Now, candidates must be nominated before the 25th of January 2025, and explanations and links are provided in the text version of my column. So this year, the nominating committee will be chaired by the 2024 SPE president, Terry Palish, who is also the outgoing president. The nominating committee will select from qualified candidates, and the new slate of recommended nominees will be approved by the board and then communicated to the membership in the April edition of JPT. Now, members who object to any of these nominations will have 45 days to initiate a petition for an alternate candidate for at least 1% of the membership, if it is about the position of president, and 2% of the concerned members for any other director position. So nominees who are not subject to a successful petition will be confirmed, while successful petitions, if any, will trigger a membership vote between the board nominee and the petitioner's nominee. Now, whatever the outcome, all new members will join the board for 3 years, commencing at the 2025 SPE Annual Technical Conference and Exhibition, ATCE, which will take place in Houston and not Dallas as originally planned. Petitions are rare, but we had a memorable set of 3 in 2022 in the wake of the failed attempt at an APG-SPE merger. 2 TD and 1 RD nominations were challenged, and all 3 petitions were successful, and 3 votes took place. The board nominees, Hamad Al-Mari, Robert Martinez, and Robin Macmillan, were confirmed against petitioners' nominees with scores ranging between 53% and 57%. So now time flies, and this year they are outgoing board members and members of the nominating committee. I was an at-large member of the nominating committee in 2022 when the petitions were initiated, and I took an active part in the online debate that followed. So it was heated at times, with occasional accusation of corruption, collusion, loss of credibility, etc. It was tense, but also, I confess, a bit entertaining. I was relieved to see our choices approved by the membership, but with an average score of 45%, the petitioners turned out to be very relevant candidates. And however, the low participation, 15%, was a signal that neither side should celebrate. We were royally ignored by 85% of our membership. And with this level of participation, it could have gone either way. Now, as an aside, this 15% turnout is consistent with other professional societies that elect their membership directly by membership vote. The dust has settled, and I guess most people involved would not use the same harsh words today. But beyond the controversial tone, the debate pointed to three perceptions, fair or unfair, shared by some of our members and which cannot be ignored. One, the perception of a top-down management by SPE leadership, particularly felt at the time of the announcement of the proposed SPE-AEPG merger. Second, the perception that the current nomination process populates the SPE board of directors with a sort of self-perpetuating pool of individuals, with a further perception, or at least possibility, of collusion in the nomination and selection process. Third, the perception that we lack transparency, specifically that we have too little communication with members and probably too few decisions taken by members. For decades, nobody cared too much about SPE's governance. When I was a young member, I assumed that there was a leadership body, but like many, I had little or no interest in it. Every year, a picture of the new SPE president would appear on the JPT cover, and that was that. SPE was serving its stated purposes of technical knowledge dissemination, providing services to its members, and serving as a place to network and interact. So for most members, this was just good enough. It is only after the 2015 downturn and the 2020 pandemic, which severely affected SPE's operations, that attention was focused on our governance and, unsurprisingly, not necessarily in a good way. Now, bringing up the issue of SPE's governance and returning today to our 2022 melodrama seemed counterintuitive, and in a way we had swept this episode under the carpet, and it may make sense to keep it where it is. So why getting back to it? The answer is that it may be needed. Beyond our differences, we are in the same boat and have many challenges ahead of us, including important collective decisions in the not-too-distant future. We need to reflect on our prior practices and decisions and use a better playbook when the time comes to make such hard decisions again. In addition, sufficient time has passed to have this conversation and absolutely not to replay the game, but to prepare for future decisions. So let us go back to the 2022 SPE-AEPG merger project. It was initiated by the leadership of both societies at the outset of the pandemic. In the case of SPE, we had a catastrophic operational loss in the fiscal years 2021 and 2022. There was no certainty on the timing for a possible return to normal, nor what the new normal would be. In such a state of uncertainty, and with bleeding finances, it made absolute sense to explore mergers with sister technical societies before it might be too late to act. So the merger attempt failed, and the existential threat did not materialize. Both societies are still around, and the new normal, financially and in terms of membership, is likely to stabilize around 75% to pre-pandemic levels. So we have survived without merging. But this was not evident at the time of the proposal. Many opposed the project at the time, but many more would have cursed the board's inaction if we had financially crashed a couple of years later without taking any preemptive action to ensure survival. So the rationale of exploring, not deciding, an SPE-AEPG merger was making absolute sense, to my opinion. Now, regarding the initial secrecy, the project began indeed with a confidential negotiation between leadership teams. And once a notional agreement was reached, it was presented to the board and then announced to memberships. An initial confidential exploration phase is common and quite acceptable in merger projects. It allows for exploring options, identifying dead ends, and getting a better picture before throwing everything into the public arena. So I do not think that SPE leadership did anything wrong here. However, given what followed, initial secret negotiation will not be an option if we must ever revisit the issue in the future. Now on the presentation of the project and its perception. I was not part of the process and I watched it from the sidelines. But this is the only point where I disagreed with my predecessors and friends. Rather than referring to the alarming situation of our finances, the chosen narrative was the desirability of the project. And even though the described benefits were real, this did not work. And I think for two reasons. The first one is that it made the decision look arbitrary. If there is no emergency, then why? And why now? If it had been presented as a necessity with a transparent presentation of our financial situation, some may have objected to this necessity, but the discussion would have been about facts and not about emotion and a feeling of a kind of treason. Two is that if there is a lesson to be learned about desirability, it is that nothing, absolutely nothing, is more desirable than a comfortable status quo, if people believe that this can be sustained. Positives carried little weight compared to this, and especially for our most senior members who were and remain emotionally attached to the DNA of their respective societies. And finally, the merger might not have worked anyway. To be fair, the organization leaderships never considered imposing this decision on their members. A member vote would be required by both societies, and accusations of fait accompli are really unfair. The project was stopped before the member votes took place, so we will never know. But the chances of rejection by at least one of the memberships, if not both, were very high. And I also had a post-mortem discussion with some of my colleagues, and this made me think that both societies might not have had the same point of view of what this merger would really be about, especially related to the differences in the number of members coming from each society. The smaller partner would not want to be subsumed. It would expect to keep its DNA and operate as before under a larger economic umbrella. And this would result in different organizations within the same merged entity. Whilst this option would certainly not be acceptable for the larger partner, as it would create silos where precisely there is none, ending up with some members being more equal than others. So such a potential deal breaker would remain if we were ever to revisit such a project. And this gets us to the lessons learned and the perceptions by at least some of our members on the way we operate, starting with an alleged top-down management. The answer is more complicated than it looks. So yes, the SPE board of directors makes decisions. And these decisions are top-down by definition. Membership votes are rare because, one, there are many decisions to make, and two, decisions are not always straightforward and require an investment of time and engagement that we cannot expect from our individual members. However, matters for SPE board decisions are most often derived from bottom-up feedback from geographic sections, technical sections, work committees, work groups, individual members, etc. We spend days, literally days, reviewing and integrating requests from all of this. So I can assure you that our board does not decide anything in isolation. But I would go further and state that the board should not make any decision of an existential nature. This would be the case for another potential merger, a substantial redefinition of our mission in the context, for example, of energy transition, or any discussion related to our name. Such major top-down decisions should be excluded, regardless of the circumstances or contingency, and this should be replaced by an informed membership vote. The SPE board may have the right to make such decisions according to our bylaws, but it does not have the legitimacy to do so. And now, despite appearances, this is exactly what the board did in 2022. Communication was not great, okay, we don't get back to that, but the ultimate decision was planned from the outset to lie with the memberships of AAPG and SPE, not their leadership. So, about the current board nomination process. The 2022 petitioners and their supporters made it clear that the petitions were a reaction to the merger project. However, the main theme developed during the petition campaign was about democracy at large in the context of the board nomination process. The petitioners pushed for the election of all board members in a process similar to a political election in a Western democracy. And for the petitioners, the SPE AAPG episode served as a revealing moment, exposing flaws in our governance rooted in the current approach to populating our board. Now, SPE is not a Western democracy, and as noted in my October column, SPE is a US-registered 501c3 not-for-profit professional organization. This means that all SPE processes, including the board nominations, are defined in its bylaws and in compliance with US laws. So nothing constrains applying political election processes as a template for the selection of a professional organization. This being stated, it would really be fun to build an electoral college for the position of SPE president. Now, when founded in 1957, SPE decided to favor a nominating committee over direct elections. This does not make SPE an autocracy, and the process of the petitions, opening the possibility of an override by the membership of the nomination process, was precisely put in place as a check and balance. As a side note, SPE has members from 145 countries, most of which are not Western countries. And although SPE members clearly share common values beyond cultural differences, we may not want to systematically impose templates on everything to such a diverse community, especially considering that SPE bylaws are already compliant with US laws. Now, on the alternative of a membership vote, to the petitioner's point of view, a direct election process of board members is indeed an option. We may decide one day to change our bylaws and move on to this. However, a direct membership election system is no panacea. The best illustration is that AAPG has a direct membership election process in place, and it faced the same backlash and internal debates when the proposed merger was communicated to its membership. In other words, a board election process is not a vaccine against this sort of disagreement. And at first sight, direct election membership makes sense. An obvious advantage is that it establishes a direct and regular link between membership and governance. And this is much more appealing than the caricature of a self-perpetuating board losing contact with membership and acting against its will. But again, the petition process is in place to precisely avoid this. Now, also, direct membership elections have four main limitations. One, board elections generally have a very low participation, and one can question the relevance of an election with 10% or 15% participation. Also, in a global society like SPE, there is a serious risk of tribal vote. So what will happen if one day a major stakeholder is upset with SPE, massively finances its employees' membership, and pushes for an election outcome? Now, the stakeholders capable of taking such decision today respect SPE and would never consider this. However, this doesn't eliminate the possibility of this happening in the future. 3, a significant achievement of our nominating committees has been their commitment to fostering a diverse board that truly represents our global membership. This balance will be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve through a set of elections independent to each other. And finally, the 2022 petition debates focused primarily on broad democratic concepts rather than specific SPE issues. Both board nominees and petitioners were committed SPE members. However, meaningful debate was hindered by the candidates' limited prior exposure to the SPE global landscape. Now, the only election that could bring interesting debates, to my opinion, is for the position of president. Candidates must be former board members, and for a good reason. The SPE president must be immediately operational and cannot afford a learning curve. I would also struggle with the state of mind of a member who would believe that he or she is too good for anything less than president and would not want to invest 3 years to learn the job in the time-consuming and high-responsibility position that already is a technical or a regional director position. So, being former board members, the candidates for the position of president would have all the elements to debate on any aspect of SPE's mission. And such a debate could bring real value to the process. Now, as a 2025 SPE president, I strongly recommend leaving the SPE director's position, at least for now, out of consideration for a direct membership election, as I believe that we are honestly doing an appropriate job of selecting our RDs and TDs. Our current process ensures that directors have the required experience and skills via the multiple layers of vetting that the nomination process entails. If we really want to try an election, I would recommend considering direct election by SPE membership of the SPE president, with the remaining prerequisites that candidates must have previously served on the SPE board. And the proof of concept, a POC, could be tried as early as next year for the 2028 president if we see a strong interest from membership. Now, on transparency and communication. Now, contrary to popular belief, the communication of SP's leadership has never been deliberately, at least, opaque, and I can testify that SP processes are straightforward. As with any society involving tens of thousands of members, more than 200 employees, and hundreds of corporate stakeholders, there are exchanges of confidential nature, but there is nothing unreasonable. So conspiracy theorists would be very disappointed if they had access to my inbox. Now, transparency is a subjective topic, and each of us may define it differently. However, one thing is certain, SP members should have a clear understanding of our actions, particularly if we intend to seek their input. Now, 2 years ago, I was heavily involved in the merger and petition discussions, and some friends contacted me for guidance under the following terms. I don't understand what is happening. I know you very well, and I rely on you to tell me what to do. So this confidence was very flattering, but it was also frustrating because these friends and SP members in general should have open access to sufficient information to draw their own decisions. Now, these columns are a small attempt on my part to increase transparency and communication. They are a bit long, to the despair of JPT staff who wonder how many members have the interest and the attention span to read them, in their totality, I mean. But they are also, I believe, reasonably exhaustive. So, for example, if you read in its entirety my November 2024 column on SPE finance, you will get to the knowledge, to the same quality level of understanding of our finances as any board member, give or take access to boringly detailed Excel spreadsheets that do not change much. Conversely, many members will not read these columns nor watch this vodcast, and that inaction is fine with me if they do not then complain about our alleged lack of communication. But this is just a start. If we see that very few SP members read or watch, if the SP Connect page that we launched doesn't take off, then it will have been much ado about nothing. And then I will stop, and my successors may try something else. But conversely, if we see that our members are eager to read, watch, and give feedback, then we will increase and diversify this communication. Finally, on members' decisions. We are planning a global member online consultation around June 2025, and this could become an annual process if it is successful. As it is also expensive, we will select a date compatible with membership votes in case of another set of petitions. Now, questions to members will be related to topics presented in these columns and potentially other items initiated by the board. This may include, but would not be limited to, the validation or not of our formal position on energy transition, the acceptance or not of SPE's extended perimeter in this context, the confirmation or not of the current board nomination process, the approval or not of the idea of an election for the position of SPE president in 2028. What to do to improve the quality of SP's deliverables, which is the topic of my next month's column, would be also part of the questions. The sunsetting or preservation of some challenged SP programs would also be subject of a survey. And in general, any suggestion coming from membership. So we will probably start these consultations as surveys and not as formal votes. We still have doubts about membership interest and participation. However, the larger the participation, the more the response will be considered as a mandate. And if this experiment is successful, we may continue it and have annual votes on important topics. So, in conclusion, reflecting on the 2022 events, I still think that the question of a merger between sister societies was very relevant at the time. The playbook turned out to be wrong, but this is easy to say now. If the idea of a merger is ever revisited, it will have to be under duress, either for financial reasons or by a clear message from our stakeholders that the party is over, that we are collectively too expensive and that we must rationalize. Short of this, I think that nothing will happen again. Either way, we need to learn from our mistakes and be prepared for that contingency. The current SPE board selection process is imperfect, but it also has its merits, and to my knowledge, there is no magic recipe for the governance of a technical society. Direct membership elections have their advantages, but also drawbacks, and our ancestors were clearly thinking this when they enacted our current SPE board selection process. But our bylaws can be changed if a majority of members wish. Now, an interesting test could be the selection of the 2028 SPE president by direct membership-based election. Now, on transparency, improving transparency is always a need, and consulting membership and on important topics, including those covered in this column, is very high on my 2025 to-do list. My next month's column will be on the quality of SPE publications. So, see you next month.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the SPE President's Vodcast with Olivier Huzy. New episodes are posted at the beginning of each month on the Journal of Petroleum Technology website at jpt.spe.org.